It is The Final Word. It's season 17. I reckon it's episode 14.
14.
I think we said last week it was 12, but it was actually 13.
Correct.
Is that what happened?
That's what happened.
There we go. That's my memory. It is 14, and it is also brought to you by NordVPN. If you don't want Anthony Albanese deciding what you get to look at on the internet, NordVPN, you can position yourself outside Australia.
I just want to say that Geoff's comments on misrepresenting government policy do not reflect myself or The Final Word.
Mm-hmm. Yep, well, you know.
That's just Geoff Lemon, not Adam Collins, not The
Sure.
Final Word as an entity.
Views do not represent my employer.
Views do not represent my business, my employer, or myself.
If you're outside Australia and you need to position yourself inside Australia on the internet, you can do that as well. That's how a VPN works. It tells the internet that you are somewhere that you may not be, because that may be useful to you. Very easy to use. One-click connect. We do this very easily. There's an app on the phone. There's an app on the laptop. You hit a click, you decide where you want to be in the world. Over 6,000 servers. They've got 111 countries, I believe, that you can be positioned in.
Yeah, David Shepherd on one foot, that number
foot.
of countries. You know what I'll be doing, and I go back to England in a month or so, whatever it works out to be after the Sydney Test match. I saw on the ABC platform that every episode of Frontline is there. And I watched, when going to bed the last couple of nights, I'm going to watch every ep, but it's improbable I'll get a chance to devour
Finish it.
So therefore, my NordVPN will come in very handy when accessing the ABC platforms.
Yep.
Last year when I was away during the Olympic Games, I didn't want to watch the commentary in Spain because, of course, it was in Spanish. So I was able to track that all via the BBC, and that never dropped out at any point. It was perfect. I've dealt with a lot of VPNs that are far from perfect, and this is not that. So nordvpn.com/TFW. A lot of people have taken up the offer. There's the money-back guarantee and all of that. But you're not going to
discounts. You get big discounts.
Big discounts. The biggest discounts.
The biggest discounts. You do
a bit of bigger discount.
You sign up for a couple of years, you get a fat discount, and if you don't like it, you get your money back. I mean, it's all working together pretty easily. So NordVPN, drop them a line. They're looking after us. You can look after them as well, and look after yourself at the same time. What have we got?
Looking after the ICC is next. Jay Shah at age 36. At age 36.
36.
There should be some sort of age limit on that. Is the new boss of the ICC. A release that... chair.
Old enough to run for president.
Oh, yeah? Isn't it 40?
Yeah, 35
for Congress and 40 for the president?
35, isn't it?
I don't know.
Press? I'm pretty
Someone
sure
else
it's
told me if
35.
I'm wrong. I thought it was 35 for something or another.
Pretty sure it's 35.
Anyway, I did civics in the States when I was in year 12, which is over 20 years ago. So who would remember that kind of information? I don't know why I thought it was 40. There you go. ICC gushing release, which referred to...
It's got to be Vivek Ramaswamy's not 40, and he ran. He was trying to run.
Okay. Geoff knows more about American politics than me. He's just spent time in America. Probably is 35. Mr. Shah expressed his vision to grow the global reach of the sport with a particular focus on the opportunity of the Olympic Games in Los Angeles in 2028.
Well, that's good.
Whilst working in partnership with the ICC members to capitalise on this moment for the sport. All that stuff's great. Mm-hmm. And that's right up the front. If it comes to pass that Jay Shah helps grow the global game, and especially when it comes to international cricket, foster a culture which doesn't end up reducing the footprint of international cricket in favour of the conglomerates that run T20 franchises, we will celebrate that every single episode we make of the show. The bit here, though, about bringing a wealth of cricket administration experience in the next line of the release. I mean, we all know how he's been able to enjoy a wealth of cricket administration experience thus far, and how he's enjoyed the patronage that's got him into this position right now. So let's not sort of pretend things that aren't true.
Yes.
But the first bit, if that's true, and there'll be a few early tests on this. The Champions Trophy.
It is true in as much as India play more games against smaller countries and countries down the ladder than anybody else. A lot of white ball stuff, and that's fine. They are the ones who get out there and help. Teams like Zimbabwe play more T20 cricket and so on like that, things like that, and get the funding that they need to get some money into their coffers and get some experience against big teams. So
that is a little bit like how all the stadiums...
There's self-interest in it.
Yeah, it's a bit how the stadiums were built in the Caribbean before the 2007 World Cup, and how other infrastructure in developing parts of the world have been
Belt and Road
and all the rest.
Stuff,
I mean, we all know at a geopolitical level why those types of things happen, and the same applies here with the support that India enjoy from countries where they tour. It's not completely altruistic, far from it, but that's one example.
It does
where
have that effect. It does have a beneficial effect.
Yeah, what I'm more focused on is scheduling, about the evolution of the World Test Championship, around funding. Now, when he had his BCCI hat on, I'm sure Jay Shah was very happy to collect, was it 38.5% of the last ICC pie? Now he's at the ICC. In theory, his constituents should be all of the full members and all of the associate members as well. So his perspective should change. Now, whether it does, time will tell. Apparently, he's not going to be overseeing this current skirmish around the PCB.
Okay.
So
where are we at
acting
with that?
Chair, whose name I can never remember in full, but I was last name's Kawaja. The acting chair of the ICC, who's been the deputy chair.
Yep.
He's from Singapore, isn't he? Anyway, he's been in charge of what was meant to be the emergency. Was it an emergency board meeting on the 30th? It was certainly a board meeting that was meant to deal with this.
Extraordinary board meeting,
and
something
duly
like that.
didn't deal with this, not officially. But it feels like we're getting closer to that inevitable compromise that we've been discussing on the program.
Yep.
But the PCB made a good point. They're like, well, okay, if you wish to do this to us, we will simply not visit India in the 4 global tournaments that they are hosting or co-hosting in the next 10 years. Now, that'll be to their disadvantage, but it'll be hugely to India's disadvantage because what makes the most money in those tournaments when India play Pakistan in the group game. So that's a nice bit of leverage they have, I think. Well, okay, you don't come here, we won't come to you. So that might be a way they can end up getting more money out of what will inevitably be the payoff here.
Right.
The other thing that that Moshe Naqvi has been saying is that he isn't ruling out the hybrid model, but he's saying that the equity part of this is that why should Pakistan therefore need to visit India? So he's willing to say that openly, whereas I think maybe a few weeks ago they were reluctant to sort of be as strident in their comments from the PCB. I don't see any reason. If
we're going to hybrid this, let's hybrid the next World Cup.
Yeah, that's right.
There's a T20 World Cup 2026 that's supposed to be in India, where Pakistan will be supposed to play in India.
Exactly.
So why wouldn't they say, well, let's play it in Singapore?
And I would if I were Pakistan, I'd be dragging the heels to the fire. I wouldn't be making a compromise before Christmas. In fact, I'd be dragging it out till the week before the tournament.
Feb 1.
Yeah, why not? Yeah. I mean, what have they got to lose in this? Short of the ICC stripping them of hosting rights.
Which would be optically disastrous.
Of course it would be. I just don't see that happening.
I still can't get my head around why. When did they announce this? 4 years ago? Was it 5 years ago when they did? It
wasn't quite that long ago. I remember I was when they announced it. It was just before the 21-20. Yeah, actually, you know what? Might have been around 21-22 Ashes. So yeah, it's a little while now.
Right. So and it was years ago, and they said here's the thing. South Africa's going to get this 50 over World Cup with Namibia, and that's interesting. And there'll be the one in the West Indies and the USA, and that's interesting. And Champions Trophy Pakistan was there, and all of us looked at it at the time and said, well, that's not going to happen. We know that's not going to happen. Yeah. We know that the ICC board is influenced, is the decisions are effectively made by the BCCI. Yeah. So why did they agree? Why did the BCCI agree to say that they were going to play this tournament in Pakistan when they would have known full well that there was no way that they would actually play this tournament in Pakistan?
I guess the goodwill bump that they got there, knowing that would force Pakistan's hand in visiting in the 50 over World Cup in 2023 at a push.
But I just can't see how it would be in your interest to commit to something that you know full well is not going to happen. You can't. If you're running 10 minutes late, you can text and say I'll be there in 5 minutes, and then you can make it 10. Right? I say this with experience. Like that's you can sneak that under the radar. No comment from you. No comment.
Can you?
But you can't say I'll be there in 10 minutes if you're going to be there in 2 hours. You
can give it a go.
I'm not saying it's never happened. But that exhausts the reservoirs of goodwill very quickly. Yes. If you're going to be there in 2 hours and you say an hour and 45, you might get away with that, right? But you've got to.
The longer the lead time, the more latitude you've got.
But you've got to. You can't. The level of overpromising. Yeah. It comes back to bite you harder if you completely fail to live up to it. Why promise that Pakistan will host the tournament if you know that you won't agree to go, your government won't let you go, no matter who's running the BCCI at that point? You know that 95% probability the government of the day, which is likely to be the same one that it was a few years ago, is not going to let you go on tour, even if you want to go on tour. Just why commit to it? Yeah, I just don't get it.
It's an interesting question. So it'll tick on and we'll keep covering it, but I think the fact that Jay Shah, even though he's not meant to be seeing this one through, I will... We will see, because each week it feels like there's another clutch meeting, and Daniel Rasool, who's been reporting on this so well for Cricinfo, will be the guy we keep following on that yarn. Sheffield Shield update, Geoff. We were pretty close to the end of the round when we missed the Sheffield.
You saw the link that Michael Bell sent to me that I sent to you,
and I sent to Tubes immediately and said try and get these guys to sponsor us. Tell us more.
There is a nanny. The nanny are hosting. There's a nanny exhibition that will be hosted in Melbourne in February of over 100 outfits that Fran Drescher wore on the show, as well as replicas of the sets.
Surely someone who's
Corny as
working
hell.
on this is going to find out that we are into the nanny.
More than any sports podcast, I'd say we talk about the nanny.
Come and partner with us. We will tell the story of this exhibition and get people through the doors.
We've already done that long segment on all of Fran Fine's outfits lining up with the colours of AFL clubs off that excellent Twitter thread. So, you know, we can do a job there.
Well, she was working in a bridal shop in Flushing, Queens.
She was.
So her outfits were plentiful. Her options, rather. So the Shield, the Sheffield Shield, Mr. Sheffield Shield round. So it was close to the end, the pink ball 5th round of the season. SA, in the end, didn't chase the million. They were set at WA and they drew at 6 for 208. The Vics did get it done at the Gabba. Which was so rare. When I was growing up, Victoria winning at the Gabba, what?
No.
They ended up winning by 90 runs. It was set up by that big third innings that we discussed last week, and they bowled out Queensland for 238 on the final night. Sam Elliott, that's the second time this season he's won a game taking a 4-for in the 4th innings. That's just a name to keep an eye on. After was it 7 for 12 he took in the One Day Cup earlier this summer, 7 for 16, something like that. So the young Victorian quick, who's the son of Matthew Elliott, making waves there.
It always puzzles me when the children of one discipline do something else. You know, Tendulkar's kid ended up being a medium pace, quickish bowler, and Sam Elliott. Well, Ben McDermott being a middle order slogger when his old man was putting it on a length.
Sure was. Matthew Elliott was in the team of the century here as well, by the way. He played
at Collingwood.
I think he was actually Camberwell Magpies, but anyway, he's got a link to this ground tangentially. He might have played for Collingwood before the merger. Can't remember.
Team of the century.
But the team of the century for Camberwell Magpies, at least, included Matthew Elliott. And the Tasmania win over New South Wales, which was substantial and significant. They bowled out New South Wales for 239 on the final day to win by 55 runs at the SCG. Completely forgot to mention in our wrap before that Bo Webster's in the test squad. Now, he was called up for Mitch Marsh, and our great mate Braden Ingram, the fetus, as he was known on the 2015 tour of England. Braden's now the Channel 9 footy reporter, which is that's a pretty big deal. If you're the Channel 9 big dog in Adelaide covering two teams, you're on the TV, you're probably leading the 9 News like 3 nights out of 7, right?
Talking about Travis Boak's calf.
Yeah, and he's a gun journo, works his tits off like we love the little fetus. He doorstopped Mitch Marsh when he got to the airport yesterday, and Mitch confirmed 100% that he's playing. So good journalism from Braden, who probably listens to the podcast still. Hope he does. So that means that Bo Webster will just be, in the squad, having made myriad contributions for Tasmania over the last couple of years, including
but it's
in this game.
It's telling that it's him. It's not Hardy. It's not.
Good point.
You've got that.
It's going to play a striker
for sure.
A
few all-rounders who've been floating around.
There's nothing more certain in the world, in my view, than Bo Webster making his debut at Gaul.
6 foot infinity.
6 foot infinity, bowls medium pace. They need a second seamer who can bowl off spin, and he's going to go into the spin rotation when the pitch starts spinning
Green
everywhere.
will still be crook when
Green's not going to be right to go, and they don't. But I think in a way, Green or Hardy is as capable as they aren't as attractive as the all-round offer as someone who can bowl a few Tony Greggs or a few Funky Millers. So we'll keep an eye on that one. But they won by 55 runs at the SCG. So Tasmania right in the thick of things again. Kuhnemann 3 wickets in the final innings. Again, not for nothing when you think about who the left-arm spin options might be for Australia when they're turning their attention to that squad or those squads for Gaul in January and February.
The Adam Zampa bit, we were watching his bowling figures in that first innings when he was none for off quite a few. He ended up taking a couple, got 3 for 96 and 1 for 44, but there was consternation in New South Wales that Sanger was left out, who's the spinner they'd more likely pick, so that Zampa could get a game, was the feeling, to give Zampa a chance to try to make a case for getting on that test tour, and that was unfairly benefiting Zampa as a player, his personal ambitions, rather than what the absolute best 11 would be if they picked him, if they picked that 11.
Proper blow-up here. Proper blow-up. You don't see this too often where private figures go public. Now, Stuart Clark's a public figure in as far as he commentates and all the rest of it. He's a selector at New South Wales, and he teed off. I mean, it's one thing for Mark Taylor to have strong views on this as a media pundit, but he's not involved in cricket New South Wales in that way. Stuart Clark's a selector.
So he's on the panel that made the decision, so he would have been voting
saying
against
that they were told that they had to pick Zampa.
Right.
So he's
from above.
From CA.
Okay.
And
so they don't then have any agency as a selection
panel
to not
and CA have said
or is it a request that you kind of have to go along with?
So let's just go back a few steps here. So Zampa's done an interview with Sam Perry and cleared this up as much as he can from his perspective, saying that, well, because Stuart Clark said that Zampa should be playing grade cricket or training, which would be difficult in the same way that it's really difficult for Glenn Maxwell. And, we know that story better than most, where the idea of him playing Shield cricket or being available for Shield cricket is nigh on impossible most of the time due to their nationally contracted commitments with the white ball teams, right? Oftentimes the start of the season and the end of the season is full of white ball cricket, and there's no real way of playing in the Shield, which is why in Glenn's case he's been starved of those opportunities that he would have relished over the journey, especially the last 5 or 6 years. Zampa, it's much the same with his schedule, but Zampa has been told by George Bailey, as he said in the interview with Sam, that he's a chance of going to Sri Lanka. He said to New South Wales, with that in mind, I'd like to play for New South Wales. Bailey then said to him, according to the report, that, well, you might not get picked because they've got the decision to who they pick as their spinner. We'll play you in the PM's 11 game. Now, we know that was something that was on Glenn's radar as well, for probably exactly the same reason. There'd be no guarantee about where it might land with the Shield team. There'll at least be a pink ball game, red ball, pink ball game in Canberra, where you're playing against India A and multi-day cricket, which is, it's not great, but it's better than nothing. And I think this is perfectly reasonable that Zampa would want to realise his ambition to play Test cricket within the context of him having existing commitments with the Australian white ball team. It's not as though he's up in Byron Bay surfing and saying he doesn't wish to play cricket. He's been playing against Pakistan. He played every single game of that series. Like, where was the opportunity for him to play Shield cricket through that? It didn't exist. This was the first available opportunity. It was realised. He picked up 4 wickets. He might get picked. He might not. He went on to say that he's been working with Tanvir for years, and he was communicating with him the whole way through. And it sounds to me like this is a bit of and again the report says the same, a bit of a communication breakdown where it's been put to New South Wales but at some point along the line that they needed to do this, and they've done it, and they maybe resented doing it, but maybe there wasn't the strict instruction in the way that they've presented it out now in public, which does create that, I guess, that level of ranking.
Well, they like I say, if it's a request, then you can feel put upon by the request and feel like you're being pushed to do it, and when maybe it wasn't quite as forthright as that. But I'll be interested in finding out. I think that's one of those things that you might find out more about in 2 years' time, when a bit more info is able to trickle
and
through.
They might pick him. I interviewed Zamps at when he was playing in the 100, right? And his view is that, his view is he's the best leg spinner in Australia. And why wouldn't he say that? He's Australia's best white ball spinner ever. Well, equal with Shane Warne. Why wouldn't he think that he's got the skill set that could transfer through to what's likely to be 2-3 day test matches in Gaul, where, attacking the stumps, blowing off pads, making the most of the conditions? I know his first-class numbers aren't great, but you're judging him against a set of numbers that were mostly compiled a dozen years ago, 10 to 12 years ago. He's barely played first-class cricket since then. He's such a better bowler now for Australia in white ball cricket than he was then, because, stop press, you're allowed to get better as a cricketer the longer you play the game and more experience you get. And most spinners do get better after they pass the age of 30. So it's going to be Swepson or Zampa if they take a leggy, right? I can't imagine there's someone...
not
from
moment.
completely outside the frame who would get picked. There's occasionally a bolter, but I think the most probable outcome is they pick Swepson or Zampa, and if they are going to pick Zampa, at least now he's got one multi-day game under his belt before the Big Bash.
And there's a bit of similar stuff going on in England with the no objection certificates. So the ECB have said that they're not going to give NOC. So the NOC is the thing that allows a nationally contracted player or a player who's floating around somewhere near that level, that allows them to go and play in an overseas league. They have to get permission. They've got to get a note from mum and dad to go and do that. The ECB have said they're not going to do that. They're not going to give those during the 100 or during the Blast, but the Blast goes for bloody ages. The Blast goes for months. The T20 Blast.
Sort of. They do crunch it in like most T20 comps do. It's more that
they do it in multiple bits.
Not the Blast. The Blast is it's only the end of the Blast, the very end that clashes.
Last season there was sort of bits. Spread around a bit. There was some of the county championship early. Anyway, it's a fair period of time to say that players can't go overseas, because you've got you've got Major League Cricket, the US thing happening in that time. You've got the Caribbean Premier League happening in that period. Next year, the Pakistan League will overlap with that because they'll push it back because they're LOL hosting the Champions Trophy.
Correct.
So all of that's going on. Plus the IPL overlaps with some of it, but the IPL will get an exemption. So if you're an England player, you're allowed to go to the IPL, but you won't be allowed to go to these other leagues. Isn't this just rewinding 10 years or more to all the problems they were having with Peterson and so on, making trouble for themselves because they'll have players who'll be getting offered huge amounts of money to go somewhere for 10 days and whack a ball for a bit and miss a couple of blast games or whatever it is. Like, surely they can't be saying that your county contract that isn't that lucrative.
So there's far more to this. So first of all, there are caveats here. So if you're a white ball only domestic player, you are entitled to still use this and go overseas. That's the first thing. That's the first kind of give there to players who, like Saqib Mahmood's an example of that. He's recently gone white ball only. Alex Hales went white ball only years ago. Jason Roy's gone white ball only at Surrey. So what they're anticipating is an influx of players who choose to part with their 4-day contract and maybe go as a pay to play. Right. But it's not so much about the experience guys. It's probably more about your Tom Banton generation who are 22, 23, are hot property on the circuit. There was 23 Englishmen in the PSL last year. Now, yes, that was in the pre-season window of February, March. That's when the Champions Trophy will be this year, but it's an example of that. The humour, of course, is that the IPL, which runs for 3 months or whatever it is, gets an enormous exemption here, and anyone can go to that because of the sweetheart arrangement that exists there. The real reason this is going on, I don't think it's unreasonable to conclude this. They're trying to sell the 100 franchises at the moment or turn them into franchises, and they don't want a situation like last year where Alex Hales and Jason Roy both left the 100 to play in the Lanka Premier League. Now, I don't think that's going ahead this year. I think that's one of those leagues that's hit the fence. But there was more of a financial incentive for them to go away and play overseas and not be in the 100 for a chunk of time. That's happened many, many times with the Blast, where players have elected to go to the CPL, for example. Yep. So this is an exercise, I suppose, in saying to those prospective buyers, don't worry, we are using market forces to keep players in England for more of the season. Yep. And I don't have much of a gripe with the way that Gould framed it either. At some point, they need to maintain the integrity of their domestic tournaments. They can't rear these cricketers only to let them fly and whatever else. And I know the PCA are pissed off with this, and the PCA have backgrounded and said, well, if that's the case, pay them more money to play domestic white ball cricket, and maybe that's where they land. I know the wages for the 100 are going up and presumably will go up a lot more once there's more private money, or once there is private money in the clubs initially and presumably in the competition later. So there's a legal piece to this about restraint of trade. Now, we often hear that. It certainly came up a lot in the era you're referring to when players were denied the chance to...
Pretty much how the Colpack thing got instituted.
Yeah, players were denied the chance to go to the IPL in the early days, and they tried to advance their legal options with restraint of trade. So that's a TBC, how that all plays out. Whether there's a compromise, whether this is ambit from the ECB and they've actually got a landing place they want to land at, and they'll compromise to get to there. Yeah. But yeah, look, it's a busy time because even look at this test match that ended the other day. Jacob Bethel ended up making a half century, as I assumed he would, by the way. I said on the show, having been... having jumped the queue, who's always going to make runs at the end, as we had on the Daily Show and all the rest of it. Like Jacob Bethel, he'll get a national contract, and that, I suppose it's not really about the nationally contracted players to an extent, but they'll hit a point in his career sooner rather than later where it will be probably in his financial interests to not be an England contracted player. And that's the type of world we're heading towards. And when I said earlier that it's going to be a completely different world that Todd Greenberg inherits as the chief executive of CA, these are the types of things which are going to be bubbling up to the surface, which have kind of been there in the background but never been before. And this decision from the ECB might escalate things even earlier than we anticipated.
Right. Okay. I see. Well, we've got to take a break. Quick one. Then we've got the World Test Championship wrap up and catch up where all of that is at. It's the final word.
It is. CBUS Super, 40th birthday.
Yeah. Happy birthday.
Hell yeah.
CBUS.
Sort your super out. cbussuper.com.au.
Just go and do it. A lot of people have 6 different bits of super from different jobs over the years. You go to CBUS, you ask them to find it, and they'll go and find all of your different superannuations and then roll it into one account. And then they will, unlike the banks and whatever, won't just steal all your money. They'll try to help you make more money.
Just pushing the boat out there in terms of things he's saying publicly today. I don't think the banks literally steal their money, but industry funds and retail funds are set up
things to charge you for.
Are set up differently. So
they don't have shareholders, so they don't need to turn a profit to send to their shareholders.
That's right.
They exist for your benefit.
Yeah, and industry funds are set up with employers and employees working in concert. They're representatives of both groups. It's a trustee model which has been in position since the start of the industry super days. So you get both sides of the fence represented on that front. and CBUS is an example of that, where for 40 years they've had the average return in a default account of 8.87%. Past performance, not a reliable indicator of future performance. But over time, you look at the returns of industry funds versus retail funds, to come back to your original point, and that is... well, it's worth doing your own research on, but there are plenty of commercials on television which do that all the time.
Past performance and future performance. Let's talk about that in relation to Sri Lanka.
cbussuper.com.au.
Who went to South Africa and won in 2019.
Yes.
They went to South Africa and lost spectacularly in the first test of their series this week. They were looking pretty good at times, Sri Lanka. They had South Africa about 4 for 40 at one point. And then South Africa recovered to 191, but even that felt like, okay, well, that's not a big score. You know, Bavuma made 70, but Kesha with a $sign, Maharaj down the order making 24 was the next best. Sri Lanka seamers did pretty good, so Asitha Fernando, whose work we've enjoyed, Vishwa Fernando, getting the drums going, Fernando from both ends, and Kumara, who I love, the big barrel chester who bangs it down at incredibly high speeds for like 6 overs and then does a hamstring. Pretty much every game of his career. You know, bowl them out for 191. Happy days. Okay, bat second, see if you can make 260, something like that, and keep a tight game in check. No, they got bowled out for 42. Sri Lanka, their lowest ever Test score. Marco Jansen 7 for 13. 7 for 13.
It was a remarkable couple of days to follow. I was watching the sort of 20-minute highlights of these to stay on top of it, because it was quite compelling stuff. I mean, the Sri Lankan seamers were all over them on morning one in favourable conditions at Durban, and you know, a pitch that was giving the seamers plenty. But that's always the question when Sri Lanka go overseas: are their seamers good enough? Well, they proved themselves to be good enough on day one and day two, because it was rain that ended play early on the first day. But yeah, that second day was wild. Bowled out in 83 balls. Which is just ridiculous. It was comfortably Sri Lanka's lowest Test score. Their previous lowest was 71 against Pakistan in 1994. A top score of 13 from Kushal Mendis. Kamindu Mendis, my apologies. Protect that average, brother. Protect that average. And Kumara down the list, making 10 not out.
I love it. You made 10 off 5 balls in 10 minutes. Very, very number 10.
Well, there was a collapse of 4 for 32 to 8 for 32 when he walked in, so I suppose he would have anticipated not being there for long.
No.
Second shortest completed innings ever. The previous was 75 balls when South Africa were bowled out by England for 30 in 1924, so 100 years ago. Jansen's 7 for 13 was the quickest 7-for since Hugh Trumbull took 7 wickets in an innings 120 years ago in 1904. Now, sure enough, after all that carnage, South Africa went on to pile it on and made 366 for 5 declared. Tristan Stubbs, you know, going against the grain. I didn't really anticipate him being a Test player. I thought he'd end up being a player who would naturally look towards being one of the full-time T20 circuiteers that we were referring to before, but that's his second 100 in his last 3 Test matches, 122 for the young gun. Bavuma, after the crucial 70 the first time around, the captain getting 113 in the second dig, and then they set Sri Lanka 516 and rolled them for 282. Resistance from Chandimal and the captain Dhananjaya, but Jansen got 4 more to make it 11 in the match, which included 3 instances of him taking a wicket the ball after he overstepped. To complete a really weird weird match. 11 in the game, 7 for 13, record breaking on a number of
11
fronts.
in the game, but produced 14 wicket-taking deliveries, if not for the front foot.
Yes.
Although some of the other ones wouldn't have existed. Anyway, you know about the passage of time. It's an odd one, isn't it? Yeah, so Shukri Conrad, the coach, really backed in Stubbs at number 3 a few months ago when they were playing their previous Test series, and whether it's just good psychology, good man management, he was like, he was very public, I think Stubbs is the guy who has the ability to be a successful long-term number 3 in Test cricket. And maybe that was enough to get Stubbs enthused about it, about taking on the project rather than going to play in the CPL wherever it is where you can make some money.
And he gets to do all of these things anyway, right?
Sure.
Like, it's not like it's just that
they don't play that much.
They don't play. That's right. They play 2 Test match series, which probably means the window's easier for him to fit into. But it's exciting. Unfortunately for South Africa, they lose Jero Coetzee, He's a guy we like because you said barrel-chested with Kumara, so it is with Coetzee. He's out of the second Test and out of the Pakistan series as well with a relatively serious groin injury. And that kind of brings us into what does this all mean with the World Test Championship.
Sure.
You know, Australia's lost. They were first, now they're second.
Yep.
New Zealand losing to England and Sri Lanka losing to South Africa. The truth is, it actually means not much at all. It's because it means that provided the results are flipped this week, provided South Africa lose to Sri Lanka, provided New Zealand win their next 2 matches against England, and provided Australia bounce back against India, it'll mean that 5 teams remain in contention for the 2 spots. So, what we're looking for here from a purely selfish perspective is all 5 teams staying in the running by not beating each other too badly, except for South Africa, who we need to win 2-0 against Pakistan, until we reach Gaul, so that we get to Gaul with all 5 teams, and I think you reckon there's 6, but we'll come to that in a sec. All 5 teams in contention all the way to the final test of the group stage. That would be awesome. Yeah,
so I may have been wrong, but my calculations had said that England could still make it if they beat New Zealand 3-0, and if one of Australia or India gets completely annihilated in this series, and if Sri Lanka and South Africa share the spoils. Now, I may be wrong there, but I think that, say, if South Africa drew their next 3 and Sri Lanka drew their next 3...
Well, South Africa getting beaten. They need to get beaten by Pakistan 2-0 to knock them out.
Well, So South Africa get beaten badly by Pakistan. Sri Lanka maybe lose this next test and then
beat Australia
draw, or Australia get smashed by India and then draw in Sri Lanka 0 or something like that. I thought there was a way. Somebody might mathematically prove me wrong, but England could get to 49% if they beat New Zealand 3-0, and that could maybe squeak them in if everything else went their way.
I don't know. Did you see Ben Stokes' comments during the week?
What was that?
Yeah, fairly churlish, I thought, saying, it's to the effect of no one understands it anyway.
Doesn't matter.
More about it's too difficult to appreciate how it all works. I mean,
honestly, first of all, you've got such a big support staff. You've got all the resources of the ECB. If there's not somebody who can explain to you what you need to do, it's absolute nonsense to say that you can't understand it. Of course, you can understand it.
Well, first of all, I don't think it's correct in the first instance. It's not rocket science to understand that it's a percentage of points, right? That has been the case since the first iteration of this round. I think it's more him trying to deflect that they're not there again.
Yeah.
And part of that
doesn't matter.
And part of that is a massive own goal. They've conceded 19 points via slow over rates, and we were there at Leeds. It was reported. It was on Stump Cam, on Stump Mike, wasn't it? When he was saying, it was Kumar Dharmasena, I think, was umpiring, when they had an over rate in single digits that third day at Leeds, and he's like, it doesn't matter, the crowd are entertained, what do you want more than this, everyone's loving it. They showed complete disdain for the system that was put in place when it came to over rates. They always take the piss, they've paid the price for it, and it's again, it's this idea that, fuck it, we're above it, we're above this, we're above
because
the
they've
rules.
never been there, right? I reckon if they'd made a final before, it might matter, because they've never been near it. They're like, who cares, bullshit prize, doesn't matter,
But also, they have said, they didn't literally say we're saving Test cricket. I know that. They didn't say... No, Ben Stokes never at any point said this team's saving Test cricket. However, they have said on multiple occasions they want to play a role in helping make Test cricket healthier and better and more sustainable and play a role in all of that. Thus the attractive style of brand of cricket they've endeavoured to play, and that was apparent in this week at Christchurch, where they went at 5 and over in the first innings and 9 and over in their second innings, right? When it works beautifully. It's very engaging, very watchable cricket. But if you are taking on that idea of having some responsibility for the health of the global game, don't talk down a multilateral tournament that's there to help bolster the strength of the Test game.
And
don't
give context.
give tacit. Don't sort of tacitly just talk it down like it doesn't really matter that much anyway. Yes, you can be disappointed at not being in the final in all probability. You can be pissed off
annoyed about the over rates
at the way the over rate thing works, but don't kind of cast the comp to one side and say, it's all a bit of bullshit anyway, which is the implication of his comments last week.
It's very much it's the clearest example of the sour grapes kind of fable that we don't want it because we're not there. And you can raise objections to how the overage thing was adjudicated and all the rest of it, and the Usman Khawaja thing, and
they got looked after
because
Usman Khawaja's intervention between Leeds and Manchester helped England, helped everyone, because it meant that you only got penalised after bowling. I mean, it may not have helped England directly in that series because Australia were typically batting for more than 80 overs, but it gave you more lenience if you're bowling out teams cheaply, and oftentimes in the Bazball era they have been able to bowl out teams inside 80 overs, which means you're not subject to any overrate penalties. It was... Anyway, the wider point here is that the World Test Championship's right at the heart of trying to make Test cricket sustainable and have context, and hopefully finding a way to build on what they've done in the first 3 cycles. And having one of the biggest voices in Test cricket kind of smirk at it doesn't help the situation.
No, and as far as the line went, I mean, the Stokes line was something like, in order for Test cricket to survive, we need to do this, this and this. And so I think it is logical to infer that that means we have to save the game by doing this, this and this. Like, I don't think that's a misrepresentation. Some people are very chippy about, oh, that's not exactly the quote that he said. That is the effect of the quote that he said. And similar sentiments have come from others around that camp. So it's not unreasonable to bring that up.
There's another World Test Championship series taking place right now between 2 teams that have been eliminated, but it's a bloody good test playing out. So this is the Windies and Bangladesh in Jamaica. We're heading towards a low-scoring thriller. Bangladesh all out 164. Not ideal how poorly they've batted since beating Pakistan 2-0, because they were one of the teams that were technically in touch for a time there, but they've really fallen away. Jaden Seals, 15.5 overs, 10 maidens, 4 for 5. How do you like those apples?
4 wickets.
4 wickets for 5 runs from 15.5 overs, 10 maidens. That's they're numbers from the 19th century. And a guy who's a dramatically better bowler than the guy we saw in Australia a couple of years ago. I feel like Seals will end up leading that attack. Swings it at pace. Highly skilled bowler, and clearly lands it on a handkerchief if he's conceding, not even a third of a run and over. But then the Windies are bowled out for 146. And that was Nahid Rana. He's the tall, 6'6", 22-year-old who bowled out Pakistan at Karachi. Rawalpindi, wasn't it? Earlier in the year. So they're investing in him. If he and Tashkent Ahmed can get going at the same time, it would make them playing, in Australia interesting, for example.
What an experience as well. As a tall person in Australia, I have moments where I feel sort of out of place or noticeable or whatever it is. Imagine being 6'6" in Bangladesh.
Yeah.
Not a lot of them knocking around in that part of the world.
Get him in the test team, Nahid Rana, keep him there as well. Bangladesh second time around, so this is Stumps Day 3, 193 for 5, a lead of 211. Jakar Ali's there on 29. So as always in situations like this, I'm predicting the tie.
All 4 results on the table.
I'm predicting that. Well, I think 3 of the 4. I don't think they can really draw from here in a low scorer unless it rains. But let's see. I think Jamaica deserves another piece of history. We bang on about them having had the first triple ton at Sabina Park and other lovely parts of being at that famous old ground. Well, give them a test tie, I say.
Yes, and England won a couple more games against South Africa in their women's white ball series, the T20s, at Benoni Hazelhurst. England cracked 200, which is good going. Danny Wyatt Hodge made 78 in quick time. Siva Brunt 67 not out. The hyphens doing the job. South Africa made 168 for 6, but we're flattered by Nadine de Klerk, who we love on this show, bashing some runs towards the end.
Yeah, was it at number 10 as well or something? She's better than that. Sarah Glenn, 4 for 20, light it up.
And then
her career record, Sarah Glenn, she's got. I had a look at this. I thought, she seems to always 89 wickets at 15 in T20 internationals. Wow. That's as good as anyone in the game.
Yeah, and just bowls straight arm leg breaks with a bit of that overspin. Our third game, South Africa made 124 batting first, and England chased it inside 12 overs, and it was Wyatt Hodge again, half-century, 53 not, so a couple of scores back from her. They'll play 3 one-dayers, then a test. They're doing the multi-format series that everybody should be doing, New Zealand cricket. I'm talking to you, NZC, multi-format series, test match. Sophie Devine, Susie Bates, test match. Are you taking notes? Hello, New Zealand. Do that. Stop being afraid. Stop hiding in your basement. Let your women's team play a test match.
Yeah, I wish. And just more squad news there. Freya Kemp's been sent home to, I guess, get a bit of a break in ahead of Christmas, because she'll be, presumably, a very big part of England's plans to win the Women's Ashes in a multi-format series. They play over here in the end of January through to the middle of February. Geoff, that's us done. I'm off to Adelaide. I'm going a day early. We've got our Adelaide live show, which we completely neglected to mention off the top. All of our live shows, well, you know the deal by now, night before the Adelaide test. Bring your friends, tell your mates. Aaron Finch is going to be there. Tickets still available for the Rhino Room, as they are in Brisbane, Melbourne, Sydney, etc. Be with us, do that with us. Thank you to all of our patrons who've been with us the whole way through and continue to support what we do around the country and around the world, our commercial partners as well. This is a team effort on the final word. For we can't stop, won't stop. Or as the Latin interpretation on our final word baggy cap says, cannot cease, will not cease. That is the essence of the podcast, I think.
Yes, will continue not stopping until the end,
yes,
or something like that.
We'll be back next on the feed with. We're going to try and drop another story time in. We will see on that front, but we certainly will be back with our preview show for the Adelaide Test match with Geoff and me the day before, after the captain's press conferences, into the dailies thereafter. If you're watching them on YouTube, click the bell, subscribe to the channel, and stick with us for all the other programs that we're going to make through the rest of the Australian summer, then into Sri Lanka, into the Champions Trophy, into the English summer, and on it goes. This has been Final Word. Adam Collins, Geoff Lemon. We will talk to you soon.
Later.